Okay, welcome everybody to the fifth lecture of five. We have made it to lecture number five. It feels like these last 5 weeks have been a very strange experience of time. It feels like the longest amount of time. To say the word 5 weeks is already just, I'm sure everyone has something different in their mind. But amazingly, we're at week number five. And what a journey it has been. We have been learning about Rav Kook, this exceptional thinker, this radical thinker, and the nexus at a person's own thoughts and feelings as we navigate our world emotionally, holistically, psychologically. And what a teacher, Rabbi Dr. Joseph, we have to guide us between these two worlds. So I'm so happy you're joining us. And if you're listening to the recording, whenever and wherever you may be, we're so happy that you are tuning into the recording. And without any further ado, it's my absolute honor and pleasure to hand over to Rabbi Dr. Joseph for our fifth installment.
Thank you, Rabbi Fishman. So beyond the personal compliments, I'll just ignore that. It may go to my head. But in terms of the way you described the class, that was really an excellent description of what we've been doing. I think we should have to make sure I listen to the recording and write that down if we ever do this again. That was an excellent description. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today's discussion, we're going to be looking at some texts of Rabbi Kook that are particularly challenging. As we mentioned in the past, his writing is poetic, abstract, mystical. Even for those who know Hebrew well, it can be very challenging to understand what Rav Kook is trying to say. And when we translate into English, of course, it makes the challenge even more difficult. But we're going to try to do our best. And I think that we're going to be able to distill something today which has the power to really be transformative in the way we think about ourselves and our own personal challenges on a very, very profound level. So I always feel like I have to pray before teaching that somehow there'll be some clarity for me, and that I'll be able to convey some clarity to all of you as well. Okay. We're going to be talking about our experience of anxiety, depression, fears, our sense of dysfunctionality, of not being good enough. And we feel damaged, defective, broken on a fundamental level. Our capacity for self-hatred, I shouldn't say ours, my capacity for self-hatred is almost unlimited. It's amazing. I'd like to rethink that sense of our defectiveness through some very challenging writings of Rav Kook. So let's just dig in. I'm going to do a screen share now. Okay. Is that showing up pretty clearly? Okay. So I just have to tell you that I had prepared this in advance with the Hebrew texts, and I took them out just because I felt that for the vast majority of people, it wouldn't be helpful. If anybody wants to have either a copy of the source sheets we've been using, I can get them to you through, if you be in contact with the synagogue, Shar Shamayim to Rabbi Fishman, and then he'll let me know, and I can send these texts to you. And if those who would like the original Hebrew, that's not a problem at all. Okay, so let's read this particular text. Now, before we read the text, I just want to frame what this text is. So Rabbi Kook actually wrote very few books, even though there are many books that are on the market by Rabbi Kook. So how did that happen? Rabbi Kook kept spiritual diaries, and he would record in these diaries his own personal reflections. Almost all of Rabbi Kook's books are selections from his spiritual diaries that were assembled by either his son or his close students. Even some of the most famous writings, for those of you who may have some familiar with Rabbi Kook's writings, for instance, one of his most famous writings is Orot HaTshuvah, The Lights of Repentance. It's a small volume. For those who study Rabbi Kook, it's a popular thing to study. He wrote the first 3 chapters and then got distracted. The rest of the book, which is quite a few more chapters, consists of selections from his spiritual diaries, which were assembled by his son. That's almost all of Rabbi Kook's books. This is not relevant, but there's some, I can't stand to say Rabbi Kook's book because I think of a cookbook, which somehow is not on the level of honor due to Rabbi Kook to think it was a cookbook. This particular text here is not from any of the Kook books. So here we have to do a little bit of history. The only thing we knew about Rabbi Kook's writings were things that he himself published, which is not that much. He published a lot of essays and articles in newspapers and that kind of thing, letters. But in terms of full books, he not much, like for the reasons I explained before. But for some reason, his actual spiritual diaries were not published. And I think there's some politics involved. It's a whole interesting issue, not part of our discussion today. The diaries were kept by his family after he passed away, and the family did not want them to be published. But not so long ago, there were some scholars who accessed some of his diaries and published them. And this particular text over here is a selection from his spiritual diaries. Now, what's interesting is that scholars who've compared the published Kook books and the spiritual diaries found that his son and his students actually did some editing. And the editing may have been done for all kinds of reasons, including the fact that Rabbi Kook was truly a radical revolutionary thinker. And he says things which can be upsetting for someone with a conservative, with a small c, bent. And so his son and his students tried to mitigate a bit the most shocking aspects of Rav Kook's writings. But when you look at the spiritual diaries, you get the unadulterated, raw writings of Rav Kook, and we're going to do that now. There are many ethical and practical evils found in the world whose source is the great aspiration hidden in the depths of the human soul to be satiated from the radiance of the light of wisdom and the perception of truth, which is the light of God. So I'll just translate that into English. So Rabbi Kook is saying that there is a lot of ethical and practical evil, suffering that's in the world. And where is it flowing from? It's flowing from our desire to be connected to God. Now, that sounds rather strange, that the source of much suffering is our noble desire to be connected to the divine. Let's read on. Since the souls cannot perceive the path which leads to quieting of this internal thirst, they are full of sickness and anger. We have this thirst to connect to the divine, to connect to God. And when we're not able to actualize, to slake that thirst, the result is this internal disorder, sickness, anger. Then it could be when he says sickness, by the way, because in another essay, he feels that the mind-body connection is very profound, that sickness may not just be emotional or mental sickness, but actually even physical sickness as a result of the inability to actualize that thirst to be connected to the divine. They occasionally become confused by attempting to slake their thirst with things which cannot satisfy at all, things which stun the emotions, so that they not feel the inner ache of their hearts. We're aching, thirsting for the divine. And when we can't make that connection, we're in a state of pain.
Rabbi
People,
Zeth,
yes.
sorry, question. What do you think he is alluding to when he says things which stun the emotions so that they cannot feel the inner ache? What do you think he means?
This. L'chaim. So,
Drugs?
drugs, all of the addicted behaviors which stun our emotions, which dull us. No one enjoys pain, I hope. And therefore, we flee from pain by medicating ourselves. We medicate ourselves in an endless number of ways. Not only things that are obvious, let's say alcohol or drugs, but all of the addictive behaviors, gambling, sexual promiscuity, pornography, all of these things, according to Rav Kook, are attempts to dull the pain of the inability to connect to God. But it doesn't work. How fortunate is the person who inclines the shoulder to bear the yoke of seeking the Lord in his might, who only quenches his thirst from the fountain of life, the Lord God of truth. Happy is the person that can take that thirst and bring it to the correct address, to connect to the divine root of all being, rather than attempting to suppress the pain by all of the behaviors which involve self-anesthesia. Now we're going to take a look at another selection for Rav Kook. Now, this one is from a work called Orot HaKodesh. Let me just explain a little bit about Orot HaKodesh, the lights of holiness. One of Rav Kook's closest disciples was a rabbi who had met Rabbi Kook in Switzerland, actually, during World War I. He's called the Nazir, the Nazarite. His son became the chief rabbi of Haifa. Shar Yavshuv Cohen was the son of the Nazir. And the Nazir felt that Rav Kook's lack of systematization of presenting his thoughts, like I said, Rav Kook didn't write books. He had spiritual diaries. So this disciple, the Nazir, took upon himself the task of systematizing the thought of his master, of his spiritual master. And he went through all the spiritual diaries of his master and organized the material topically. And the result is this word Orot HaKodesh, which I believe is 3 volumes. I have the whole thing, and maybe more than 3, I forget already. And it's organized topically. So it's a kind of encyclopedic presentation of the entire expanse of Rav Kook's thinking. Now, it's Rav Kook's own words, taken out from the spiritual diaries. So there's no attempt at explaining what Rav Kook means. It's a very difficult book to learn, but it at least presents the issues in some type of topical order. And that's what we're going to be looking at right now. And I think you'll see the connection between what we saw in his spiritual diary, in the last selection, and this one. There's no pain in the world comparable to the pain of the yearning for the absolute good. No pain in the world comparable to the pain of the yearning for the absolute good. Of the terrible thirst which afflicts the soul in its search for spiritual bliss, to be filled with the radiance of integrity, of wholeness, of righteousness, of divine communion, associated with the purification from all sin and transgression. And now, poetically, Rabbi Kook cites a verse from Psalms, God, you will not despise a contrite and crushed heart, that Rabbi Kook, and by the way, I don't believe that Rabbi Kook is writing in the abstract. Rabbi Kook, I think, feels all of this in his own personal, intimate spiritual life. He feels that incomparable pain of yearning for the absolute good. And that feeling of having a contrite and crushed heart when we're not able to actualize that yearning. All righteousness and all evil, all truth and all falsehood, all good and all bad, joined together in one great and wondrous bond over which shines the supernal good of creation. Now, this is already mystical, because Rav Kook, being the mystic that he is, sees the world which emerges from God and actually within God. That's a separate topic, which I believe we discussed a little bit in our first session. Perforce, the world must partake of the same unity that characterizes its source. The world emerges from the one. What is the most fundamental thing we say about God? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. His oneness, his absolute unity. And that which emerges from absolute unity must on some level share that quality of absolute unity, of absolute oneness. And the fractured nature of unity of the world is an aberrant external expression of that which, if we could go deep enough, we would see, in fact, is absolute oneness and unity, like God himself. And that's what he means here. Things that we would regard as antithetical, righteousness and evil, truth and falsehood, these are polar opposites. These are things which can't coexist. Good and bad, joined together in one great and wondrous bond, over which shines the supernal good of creation, that on some ultimate level, divinity underlies all of existence. And the fractured nature of existence belies the oneness that is the root of all being, the oneness which reflects God's oneness, the goodness which reflects God's goodness. See, this is getting very deep. See, all of Ross Cook's spiritual and psychological insights all really flow, not from a study of Freud, but from his study, as a matter of fact, the opposite. Freud, who felt that at the very root of human consciousness are very distorted mechanisms of sexual frustration, etc. Rav Kook feels if you dig down deep enough, you'll find something sublime and good. Rav Kook derives this from this Kabbalistic notion that underlying all of existence is the oneness and goodness of the divine. Fortunate is the person that can deeply encompass the unitary compass of all. Fortunate is the person that can look at this fractured, polarized, diseased world and somehow sense that underneath it all, if we could just pull away all of the diseased flesh, it would reveal a sublime oneness. He will find pleasantness in the bitter, purity in the impure, truth and falsehood, righteousness and evil. A person who can see beyond the surface and can see the divine root of all being will subdue all bad, all evil, all falsehood, and all ugliness, so that they be transformed to their nature of truth and righteousness, light and good. All supernal instruction is founded on the explication of the details of these principles. Everything that is involved in character development, a spiritual life, is simply an explanation of this notion that underlying all of existence is the divine, utter oneness and sublime goodness. Now, I'm going to be honest. It's very hard in our historical context right now, in which evil is so overwhelming, in which lies smother truth. To be able to somehow even contemplate the notion that underlying all this is divine goodness. So I'm going to leave that to Rabbi Fishman to address in the next series of lectures. So we'll stay away from politics, and politics is not the right word for it. We'll stay away from the global issues and just take it down to our personal lives. I want to get a better understanding of this idea by looking at a passage. It's a shocking passage in the Talmud. Really shocking passage. There's a passage in the Talmud that it deals with dream interpretation, which the Talmud seems to think that dreams can be very instructive. if you know how to decipher the symbolic nature of the dream. So it gives an example here. Who dreams of having intercourse with his mother. Person has a dream, he has intercourse with his mother. What's the meaning of that? May anticipate understanding. It's an amazingly good thing. It means you're going to have the quality of, in Hebrew, binah, of understanding. You're kidding. I think that a person who has a dream like that should go to a good therapist right away. That's an extremely disturbing dream. Talmud says, no, it's an amazing dream. He's going to acquire understanding. Why? So the Talmud says the key to unlocking the symbolic nature of the dream is found in Proverbs. Because in Proverbs it says, yea, thou wilt call understanding mother. So the Talmud seems to suggest that our minds, in sort of a sense of the Jungian collective consciousness of the Jewish people that's been programmed over thousands of years of being linked to the Bible, where the word understanding and mother are associated with each other. That will call understanding mother. So the desire for mother is actually symbolic of the desire for understanding. And so with that key, we're able to unlock the symbolism of the dream, that the intercourse with mother is actually a connection, a yearning for binah, in Hebrew, of understanding. And the Talmud goes on, doesn't get any better. He who dreams of having had intercourse with his sister, don't fret. Don't go to a therapist. This is a wonderful thing. It means you can anticipate acquiring chokhmah, wisdom. Why? Because if we subject that dream to this symbolic analysis based upon the association of words in the Hebrew Bible, verse in Proverbs, say unto wisdom, thou art my sister. So the desire for sister is a symbolic desire for wisdom. So says the Talmud. Now, one of the things about Rabbi Kook, which is particularly fascinating, he had a total mastery of all Jewish literature, from the Bible, all the rabbinic writings, the Talmud, medieval works, a total, absolute mastery. But he rarely quotes these sources. He'll quote verses, but he won't say, well, the Talmud says this, and I'm going to explain what it means. But when you study Rabbi Kook, and if you're aware of these rabbinic sources, or if you have an annotated edition of Rabbi Kook's writings, which in the footnotes point to sources, you can see that Rabbi Kook is taking the entire corpus of Jewish traditional literature and then giving it this very contemporary, mystical, poetic, synthetic expression. This passage in the Talmud is describing very distorted, neurotic dreams of incest. And the Talmud says it's a reflection of something wonderful. It was of great comfort to me to discover that it wasn't just Rabbi Kook who was able to distill this message from the Talmud. There's another very famous rabbi. It's a contemporary, a younger contemporary Rabbi Kook, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. He was born in Lithuania, spent time in London, and eventually moved to Israel, where he lived in Bnei Brak. And there's a multi-volume collection of his writings called Michtav Eliyahu, which means letters of Eliyahu. His first name was Eliyahu, Elijah. He says the following in one of his writings. There are dreams which reveal the positive root, which lies in the subconscious, for which the evil impulse is a substitute. As in the Talmudic passage, who dreams of having intercourse with his mother may anticipate understanding, as it is said, yea, thou wilt call understanding mother. Now, this is a very terse remark that Rabbi Yesser makes. He cites our passage, and he's saying that the dream, which in this case is very neurotic and evil, it's actually the outer expression of a positive root in the subconscious. As we saw in the Talmud, that these distorted neurotic dreams are an expression of yearning for wisdom, yearning for understanding. Now, it happens to be that Rabbi Dessler, in another volume of the same work, discussed this idea in a little bit more detail. And I think you're going to hear Rabbi Kook in this. Now, why was I comforted by seeing this in Rabbi Dessler? Because Rabbi Kook was subjected to blistering criticism. I even heard just last week a YouTube lecture from a contemporary rabbi who still, to this day, reflects the hostility towards Rabbi Kook, which is in certain quarters of the Jewish world. And he started off his lecture by saying, well, Rabbi Kook was certainly an Orthodox Jew. And then, but, so that's the best he could say about Rabbi Kook. He was an observant Jew. He kept kosher. You could eat in his house, probably. So it's Rabbi Dessler, who is a very conventional rabbinic figure within the ultra-Orthodox world, the yeshiva world. It was comforting to see that Rabbi Kook's views are shared. Look what Rabbi Kook here says. Rabbi Dessler, I'm sorry. The entire basis of man's longing for all manner of worldly pleasures derives from a desire to silence, through the substitution of something similar, the sense of a deficiency that he finds within himself, which is in fact nothing other than a spiritual hunger, the longing of the soul for perfection, but a substitute cannot satisfy. This is almost the exact words of Rabbi Kook. That our involvement in activities, whether, as we mentioned before, whether alcohol, whether drugs, whether licentious sexual behavior, whether it's gambling, whether it's shopping, these are attempts to silence that deficiency. But that deficiency is actually not a deficiency. That pain is actually just spiritual hunger. It's longing for perfection. But those substitutes don't work. Those substitutes are not the problem. They're the inadequate solution to the problem. The problem is the nobility of our longing for perfection, for the divine. That's the problem. And cheap substitutes, those things we look to solve that problem of inner pain, they don't work over the long haul. They work for the first few times, and then the solutions become problems. Okay. Now I think I'm gonna do something a little slightly unusual now. I haven't really done this up till now. This is a little experiment. We're gonna take a pause, open it for any questions about Rob Cook, what he has said now. And then after giving it a few minutes, I want to then discuss how Rabbi Cook's idea is expressed in a really radical approach in psychotherapy. So any questions about what Rabbi Cook has said before we move into contemporary psychotherapy?
That was actually my question, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I got lucky. So it can be very scary when you open it up to the floor. Okay. So I want to talk about Dr. David Burns. He's a psychiatrist at Stanford. He was one of the pioneers of cognitive behavioral therapy. And he developed an approach in cognitive behavioral therapy, which he calls TEAM. So I had the good fortune to study with him personally. I even went on a hike with him because I don't think he does it anymore, but he's getting older. But he used to every Sunday. He lives near Stanford in that area, and he would go on a hike with his students in the mountains in that area around Silicon Valley, Mountain View. So I went once, met at his house, and he would do, it was amazing. First of all, I was sore for a week, and he's a lot older than me. So he's mad at something different than I was. It was very hard to keep up with him. And he would do therapy with the students as we would take this 3-hour hike. And he would just there'd be people walking, and he would just come up to you and say, so what's going on with your life now? And then he would do this whole psychotherapy thing as you're walking on this hike. I've never had a problem since that day. That is not true. Okay. So one of the most interesting things that David Burns has contributed to the field of psychotherapy is what he calls paradoxical agenda setting. Now, we have to go backwards and talk about one of the biggest problems in the process of therapy, and that is what people refer to as resistance or therapeutic resistance. Now, this actually is a wonderful term for psychotherapists because we can just blame the client or the patient for the fact that there's no progress. You're just resisting. Right? If you would just do what I tell you to do, everything would be fine. I'm laughing, but it's actually true. So resistance is actually one of the most vexing problems in making progress in psychotherapy. The client resists. You give, like in CBT especially, homework is a big thing. Nobody ever does homework. And as much as we say, and we've got all the analogies, it's like learning to play a musical instrument. If you just sit 45 minutes a week at a lesson to play piano and you never touch the piano during the week, you're not going to learn how to play piano. If you want to fundamentally change the way that you've been experiencing your own existence for the past 40 years or more, it requires a lot of work to undo those patterns that are so deeply entrenched. It requires daily work. So that makes perfect sense. But nobody does the work. Almost nobody. Why? They want to change. They don't like being miserable. But if you say, look, 20 minutes a day, I want you to keep this journal, 20 minutes a day. Sorry, Rabbi. You're going to be mad at me. I had a client today who prefaced the session. You're going to be mad at me. I knew it was coming. Didn't do my homework. So it gets us off the hook, right? There's no progress because it's your fault. So David Burns has a radically different approach. What's the source of resistance? Okay, now, here we're going to have to get a little deep. People's pain, emotional pain, they're the problem. That's the problem. I have anxiety. I have depression. I have phobias. Whatever it may be. That's the presenting problem. That's what's wrong with me. I'm defective. So David Burns says that emotional pain you're experiencing is not what's wrong with you. It's what's right with you. That our emotional pain is not what's wrong with us. It's what's right with us. And that's the source of resistance. Because if our emotional pain is flowing from what's right with us, why would we want to let go of it? It's what gives us meaning. It's what gives us value. It's helpful. Why would I want to give that up? I think I want to give it up because it's painful. No one likes pain. But if on some deeper level that I'm not really aware of, I hold on to that pain because that pain is what's right about me. It's reflecting what's noble and beautiful and awesome about me. I don't want to let go. So David Burns says we have to bring to conscious awareness how your pain is reflecting what's so wonderful about you. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what's right with you. So I want to show you an example. So this is a tool that's used in Team CBT. It's called a positive reframing table. And the thought or feeling, the painful thought or feeling, that's in the left column. Can everybody see that on your screen? And then the client asks themselves, what are the advantages or benefits of this negative thought or feeling? What does this negative thought or feeling show about me and my core values that is beautiful, positive, and awesome? So this particular example here, I'm not breaking any patient confidentiality here. This was actually a real case David Burns has a podcast. If anybody's interested in learning more about this, he wrote the book it's the biggest bestseller ever about CBT called Feeling Good. And so it's called the Feeling Good Podcast. You can search for it. Then it's got like 400 or maybe more set podcasts already. And they do live therapy on it, which is really amazing to listen to. So the live therapy is almost always with therapists. And I know this is shocking news. Therapists also have problems. I know you don't believe it. That's why they became therapists. So, and they agreed to have it recorded. And so he does therapy with them. this particular, I think this took 6 or 7 sessions. This particular client, his name is Mark. So it's not like I'm not revealing anything secret here. And he had a very estranged relationship with his son. And it was something that caused him tremendous grief, guilt, shame, depression. Now, he wants to get rid of that, all those feelings of depression, grief, sadness, worthlessness, shame, etc. That's his problem, right? He wants all that zapped. So along comes Dr. Burns and says, wait, not so fast. What does the sadness and depression show about you that's so amazing? So at first, the client is like, excuse me, it's my problem. It's what's wrong with me. Can you please remove it? So David Burns just forces you to start thinking. My depression shows my love for my son. He wouldn't be depressed about this estrangement, an alienation from his son, if he didn't love his son. My depression shows that I value connection with other people. It's important to me. Some sadness and depression are totally appropriate. Bad things happen. To always smile and be joyful in the face of a world where bad things happen would be psychotic. The disconnect from reality would be the disconnect of one's heart from the genuine pain of existence. These feelings have motivated me to try to solve the problem of my social anxiety and to take an enormous risk in front of more than 100 people. So this session that he did was in front of 100 people that was recorded. And he actually has social anxiety. But his sadness and depression motivate him to take a risk, to do something he normally wouldn't do, which is to become vulnerable in front of all these people. These feelings show how much this matters to me. Anxiety. My anxiety keeps me cautious and protects me and my son. You know, that's what anxiety is there for. It's there to keep you safe. Shame. My shame shows that I have a moral compass. I wouldn't feel shame if I didn't think that having a proper relationship with my son was important. And because I feel that that's not happening, I feel shame about it. I feel I've betrayed my own values. But it shows what my value is. I have a moral compass. My shame tells me that some changes are needed. How about his feeling of worthlessness? My feelings of worthlessness show that I'm honest about my shortcomings. Wow. He's honest. That I have high standards that have motivated me to learn, to grow, and to do a great deal for my son. That's why he feels worthless, because it's reflecting what's good, what's right about him. It shows I'm realistic about my flaws. It shows I'm accountable. It shows I'm humble and not grandiose or arrogant. Humility is a spiritual quality. And so on and so forth. And we don't have to go through the whole thing here, but you get the idea. He goes through every emotion of pain, painful emotion, loneliness, self-consciousness, right? And what does this show about me that's amazing? Now I'm going to show you something, but don't tell anybody about this. So Dr. Burns he's very methodical in his approach. And so this is a cheat sheet for me. So let's say someone comes to talk to me and they're feeling sad, down, depressed, unhappy. And I'm trying to get them to explore what does that show about them that's so great. So he created this kind of cheat sheet of like common things, right? Sad, down, happy, depressed. It shows I'm realistic looking at the problem or a loss, which has been difficult. That feeling of sad, down, depressed, unhappy may be appropriate. It reflects your intense love of your cat who died, right? Whatever, right? Dr. Burns always starts crying when he talks about his cat who died. That's why I mentioned that. Okay. So this is like a cheat sheet that goes through all these different emotions and describes the advantages that one gets from those emotions and the wonderful things it shows about you that you're feeling this pain. Okay. What is this doing? This is saying that the pain we feel and the emotional turmoil that we experience and the behaviors we engage in as a result. I mean, here's urges to give into habits such as overeating, procrastination, drugs, right? What's great about that? Shows I have a free spirit and unwilling to conform. Like, people tell me not to, I don't care. I want to do this. Shows a desire, peace, and happiness, because when I drink a couple beers, I feel peace and happiness. So whether it's the emotional turmoil, whether it's the behaviors which we use to self-anesthetize, they're all reflections of what's right with us. So then Dr. Burns, after doing this, says to the person, are you sure you want to get rid of all of your depression, your anxiety, your fears, your self-destructive habits? Look what they show about you that's so beautiful. Look how useful they are. Are you sure you want to get rid of them? Now, I hope she's not listening. I had a client who's a hoarder. I did this exercise with him. And he decided not to get rid of his collection. He came to the conclusion, like, you're right. This hoarding is a reflection of what's beautiful about me. And now I understand, it makes perfect sense. So I'll just, fine, just gonna live with it. And then the therapist just says, fantastic. Is there any other issue you want to talk about? That's called open hands in Team CBT. You have to have an open, let go. You know, therapists are very narcissistic. You know, we need to feel like we're solving everybody's problems, but no, let go. They realize that hoarding works for them. Makes sense. That doesn't happen a lot. So what we do is the following. Once we can recognize that pain, that neurotic behavior, that self-anesthetizing is actually a reflection of what's right about you, what's noble about you, what's awesome about you, we then present to the client, I wonder if you could have your cake and eat it too, as it were. Could we keep those values? Keep those priorities that you have that are so beautiful, but using certain techniques to dial down the pain. And we'll even say to the client, how painful is the depression you're feeling right now between 0 and 100? 90. How much pain would you need to keep to maintain fidelity to those values that are so important to you? Because if you were to give up the pain 100%, that means you don't care anymore about those values. Our pain reflects our care, our concern. If we were apathetic, we would have no pain. That's what alcohol does to us. We're completely apathetic, no pain. So the We ask the client, how much pain would you need? We'll dial it down. 20 out of 100. Fantastic. Now I have some techniques. We're not going to talk about the techniques today. We're going to keep your values. You'll experience sadness, anxiety, but it's going to be manageable. It's going to be 20 out of 100, not 90 out of 100. You'll be able to maintain that nobility that's inside of you. Or as Rav Kook would say, that yearning for the divine. That's at the root of our neurotic and self-destructive behaviors. It's that what's right about you. And then resistance melts away, because resistance, instead of being a convenient excuse for lack of progress in therapy that's convenient for the therapist, resistance is the completely sensible clinging to those values and those concerns, which are so precious and so noble, so awesome, which produce concomitant pain. But on a subconscious level, if I give up the pain, I give up that which is important to me. So let's dial down the pain. It's fully experienced the range of human emotions, which includes some pain, but not so much that it can interfere with our ability to navigate this world with a life of meaning and productivity. And amazingly enough, Dr. Burns, of course, never heard of Rabbi Kook. But it's an amazing therapeutic contemporary expression of this notion that Rabbi Kook expressed, Rabbi Dessler, we already find in the Talmud, in that very strange passage about these neurotic dreams. In conclusion, I just want to say how wonderful it's been. I want to thank Rabbi Fishman for hosting this, and to see the familiar faces that just give me so much joy to be with you each week, and to share things that are real and meaningful. This is life. It's nice when Torah has something to do with life. So with that, I bid you adieu, and I look forward to another meeting in somewhere, sometime in a happy occasion.
Thank you, Rabbi Zev.
Bye-bye. You're welcome.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Rabbi Zev. This was extremely powerful. The insights into Rav Kook in and of themselves were incredible, inspirational. It's not often that we get access to these very deep ideas. And what was so incredible, and you just said it in the last sentence that you said, how nice is it when Torah has something to do with the real life? You know, that is what Torah is all about. I'm not speaking to Rabbi Zev now because he knows this a lot better than me. But I share with everybody, the Torah is about us. If we believe that this is a document that was written by an infinite being, and we are a part of that big picture, then we're not reading about stories that happen to other people in the ancient world. We're reading into our own lives. And there's something extremely compelling to be able to touch something that's real. And that's what real Torah learning is. That's what true Torah learning can be, where we learn about ourselves through the text of the Torah. We read life into Torah and Torah into our lives. And that's what Rabbi Zev has so expertly been able to provide us with over these last 5 weeks. And I have benefited from it personally, and I hope that you have too. And your way and your manner, it has reminded us that this is real and that there is depth. And that's a blessing. You are a blessing. So thank you so much, Rabbi Zev. This was incredible. If you have enjoyed this course, as I mentioned at the beginning, please know that they're recorded. I'm going to stop the recording now. Please know that they are recorded, and you can find all of them at the Shah HaShamayim's YouTube channel. And also, please know that the Shah Learning Center is offering a variety of additional courses and classes. And if you are not a native of Montreal, then please go along to shahhashamayim.org, shahhashamayim.org, and on the website you will be able to see a host of additional classes and courses that are being offered over the coming weeks. We wish everybody well, and as we sign off, we'll wish you the wishes that everybody seems to be saying at this time here in Israel, which is Basorot Tovot. May we hear better news.
Amen.
Amen.
Be well, everybody. And thank you so much.